Hello everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Here we will be analyzing and reviewing different aspects of commerce in business, economics, and the accountancy sector, and how it affects maybe our daily lives and our economy. My name is Joel Francis, and I'm a teacher at Devamatha CMI International School, situated in Kerala, in India. And today we have in this podcast my students from grade 11, and we will be reviewing a topic which is of prime concern, and it's definitely going to hit the headlines pretty soon across the world. So I'll introduce each one as we go into the topics. Now, here in Kerala, it's the monsoon is going on, and we're having heavy rains. And the rains is what feed our crops and our sustains life in this beautiful piece of land. And this is what happens everywhere and all around us. Earth is covered by 70% of water. However, the question remains how much of it can be utilized. There have been thoughts pouring in of privatizing this basic resource. And today, in this podcast, we will be looking into whether water is a human right or a human good. The topic we touch upon today we'll be analyzing the privatization of water, and we'll have the different panelists speaking about their points of view for and against the motion. So we can start off with Advaith, a grade 11 student. He's an avid business enthusiast and hope to be a regular in this podcast, which will be coming across each month. So Advaith, over to you. What is your view of the water privatization?
Water privatization in India started in the late 1990s. In the last 2 decades, there has been a massive increase in the private sector participation products in the water sector in various cities across India. Most of the major private sector players like Suez, Vivendi, Thames Water, and Bechel are present in India. Nagpur is one of the largest cities in India to hand over its entire water service to a private firm. This benefits both suppliers and consumers, as the suppliers is making profits and the consumers have access to clean water for day-to-day use. The private sectors also maintain the pipelines and everything to make sure the water is clean and of use to everyone.
Okay, so that is from Advaith. Advaith has given an intro into us into what is water privatization and how it's going on with a special focus on India. So more than 2.5 million years ago, the Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus had said, the best of water, the best of everything is water. And 97.5% of our water which we have in this world is salt. So it's salt water, while the remaining 2.5% of it is fresh water. And as you all know, humans can only consume fresh water, right? And among this 2.5%, only 0.5% of the fresh water is actually accessible. That is a huge concern which we have to do. So water privatization is being showcased as an initiative which kind of finds a solution of ensuring that there isn't much water wastage in this world. Now, water is one of the most scarce resources which we have, and humans depend on this water. So is water privatization the best way forward? Is it the best way forward that we hand over the most primary natural resource which we have in the hands of private players? Or is there something that maybe our public sector can do to ensure that water remains a basic human right and not another commodity like all the other kind of things? In this era of capitalism and the fight between capitalism and communism, the question remains, how do we find the best practice to solve our issues? Now we have Antony, who will tell us how this move could benefit or if it could damage us in the long term and the short term, and why we would want it or not want it. Antony, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. So I'll be telling you about why personally I feel that water should never be privatized. Well, water, as Joel sir mentioned, is not just a commodity. It's something that's essential to daily life. The only time I'd feel that privatization of water would make sense is if the government of that specific country was going through a severe financial crisis and it would get to the point where they couldn't supply clean water to the people. Only in such a bad situation would privatization of water make sense to me. Water is known as the elixir of life for a reason. It is simply impossible to live without. From drinking water used for from drinking water to water used for sanitation, water is one of the most used resources in the world. And I feel we shouldn't let large corporates get control over this valuable resource. One corrupt business person is all it would take to ruin the water supply for an entire nation. Besides that, water privatization already has a history of failure across the world. Water privatization attempts have already failed in many places, such as Buenos Aires, Metro Manila, etc. Another example of this would be the case of water privatization in France. When the water was privatized there, the prices of water increased by a whopping 150%, meaning that people could no longer afford a basic commodity such as water. And to make matters worse, the quality of the water also allegedly reduced. A large increase in the price of water could also lead to people having to drink contaminated water, and this can lead to various diseases such as typhoid and cholera. Many people lose their lives due to this. In underdeveloped countries such as Yemen and Ethiopia, this is already a big problem. A combined 1,166 people have died due to diseases such as cholera and typhoid. This problem would be made only worse if a private company took over. Privatization of water could also lead to conflicts, such as the such as the one that we see in Kombuchavan in Bolivia, which had a water war due to water privatization. Water wars are actually already quite a serious issue in modern society, as we're using up water resources at such a fast rate. According to UNESCO, there have already been 1,831 wars/conflicts over water. If water was privatized, I think the situation would get really out of hand. Water privatization has also led to people having to choose between water and food. This is such a horrible situation, and no person should ever have to go through such an issue. Water supply and sanitation should always be in the control of the government, as it is their duty to provide a service to the people. If the government manages water supply and sanitation, it will reduce conflict and lead to a better life for millions of people.
All right, thank you, Anthony, for that insightful. So, as you can see, as Anthony has said, there have been a lot of water wars, and this is just the beginning. So, the major debate on whether water issues, on all the water issues rather, lies on the perception of water as a right or a good. Right? It's a simple dichotomy between economic efficiency and basic welfare or human rights. And a fun fact, I'm not sure if it's fun, but it's a fact that this debate of water privatization has heightened after the 1992 Dublin Water Conference and the World Water Vision, who described water as an economic good. Though this aim of the statement was to promote that water be priced at a level that makes people use sparingly, it created a lot of controversy. And in today's world, everything is data. The world runs on data. As Reliance Industries CEO said himself, data is the new oil. And we have with us right now Ashik, who can give us a bit more insights on the statistics and numbers that are associated with the water privatization controversy.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you more about the statistics right now. So the countries that have started water privatizations are France, England, US, US, Mozambique, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. France started privatization in 1853. England started water privatization in 1989. US started water privatization in 1772. Mozambique started water, water privatization in 1999. Malaysia started water privatization in 1992. Indonesia started water privatization in 1989. Philippines started water privatization in 1997. Brazil started water privatization in 1995. Chile started water privatization in 1998, and Colombia started water privatization in 1996.
All right, so we can see that a lot of countries have already begun this process of water privatization. And what is your impact? Has it ever impacted you? To all my listeners out there, has it ever impacted you? The shortage of water, the not able to get access into clean water, has it impacted you? And then, if it has, you might be able to relate it even more. But it's not just the people that this issue can impact. Humans also form another kind, which is called businesses. Businesses run an economy, and water is a main source for quite a few businesses, the main backbone. So we have John with us here right now who can tell us how it would be for the other businesses in the same sector or in other sectors. How does this concept of water privatization affect them?
Yeah, so I personally think that water privatization can affect businesses according to what type of business they are doing, right? So let's say that it is a business who provide water for the civilians in the country, right? And it's pretty obvious that the business of that business, that particular business, will boom because mainly because water is a need and everyone will pay for it, right? But the problem arises for the other businesses, such as factories who produce juices and stuff. Uh, the main problem arises when they actually have to pay for the amount of water which they take in, right? And that money is going to another firm, and that the water paid, like, no, I'm sorry, the money paid for that water is not being subsidized by the government, right? So the problem arises there. But then that problem can be can be solved when it comes to the civilians, right? So let's say that the water, let's say the government will be willing to subsidize the water when it comes to the civilians, when the firm sells its water to the civilians, right? So I mainly think that the businesses who sell, like who provides water, won't face much of an issue when it comes in providing water services, like when water becomes privatized, right? And another thing is that they will also get a revenue, right, in which they could grow, in which the government could also earn tax, and they can also provide employment, and all of these factors can lead into economic growth, which is actually good for the economy, right? And another thing is that I believe that businesses are more capable, like private firms are more capable of providing water to the civilians more than the government can, right? And the main reason why I think is that all private firms have the main motive of earning the highest amount of profit, right? But then the problem arises there when people think that they are being charged, or they are it's not something, like when they think that it's not something which you are being sold for, it's something which you should get free, right? But if the government takes action to subsidize water, then I think that problem will be solved, right? And another problem which arises from this thing is that a monopoly can be formed, and if a monopoly is formed, then we could say that the firm which became the monopoly in the water industry will have immense amount of power in which they could control the supply of water, which could be catastrophic for the economy, right? And another thing which I think here is that if water is privatized, there obviously there will be a competition in that sector, and therefore it can lead to innovation, increase in quality in the water provided, and etc. Right? And another problem is that people always tend to argue that the government provides water better than private firms, where I think it's wrong, because the problem was never solved when the water services was run by the government, right? And we only have a chance to solve it when it is run by private firms, right? And another thing is that the innovation which could be brought by these private firms can actually lead into many opportunities, right? So let's say, for example, a firm with enough fund could actually bring in solutions to resa- uh, to filter out seawater into pure water, which could be used, right? And as we know that seawater is like they have a lot of, like, we have a lot of seawater, as Joel so rightly said, that 98% of our water is basically seawater, right? And we could use that to give water, to produce water, to provide water to the citizens in the country, right? And that can only be done if the private firms earn their revenue from selling water at the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that interesting piece of information. So, John did give an argument that governments have floundered the way the water was managed, and that has actually brought into a requirement that privatization be brought into. Now, having said that, uh, there are two kinds of people in this debate. One that recommends that the state control natural resources to basically prevent the destruction, while the other one recommends privatization as the solution for the problem. Now, we are not here to side with anyone. We're just here to maybe state our views based on facts. And one main fact is that the human right to water is generally derived from the human right to life. Because without drinking water, people will die. So, from where I see it, it is a right to drinking water, a basic right for every human being. Now, the proponents of this viewpoint further refuse privatization because it entails the principles of scarcity and profit maximization rather than long term sustainability in water management, which is what we require. We need a sustainable management. And there are also now many transnational corporations which are backed by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. And they're increasingly forcing the third world countries to abandon their public water delivery systems and contract with the private companies for what they call as structural adjustments. And their arguments for this, they say that it would bring around $200 billion a year from an 800 billion worth global market. But is this what we require? Have we become, or have our governments become so weak that we are unable to save or reserve one of the basic resources which we have? So, next we have Josh, who can maybe enlighten us on what governments might do about it. Are they on board with this water privatization? Do they oppose it? And why, if they do oppose it, what measures can they take to improving the water system?
So I really think looking at the privatization of water on a macroeconomic scale is really helpful, as it helps us understand the government's point of view on this very pressing topic. Before we get to how this might affect governments and how they would respond to it, it's important that we understand some of the many reasons the government might choose to privatize utilities. One main reason could be to improve the quality and maintenance of the utility, and it could also be to reduce the government's influence over the economy, and reducing the government's influence uh, would be an ideal step to boost an economy. And In some reasons, governments might oppose privatization would be the risk of a monopoly, as water is such an essential resource that we're running out of currently, and this is a huge factor. Another reason could be the change in the motive, as government's motive for owning water plants and keeping it nationalized would be to provide an essential service. But when this becomes privatized, their motive changes into making a profit instead of providing the service that might have an undesirable effect that might have undesirable effects on the supply and distribution of water. Now, different countries react differently to the idea of privatization, and they might have different motives to privatize or not to, and they may have different points of view on the privatization of water too. Now, Saudi Arabia is all for the privatization of water. They privatized the supply of water in 2008. But we cannot say with concrete evidence that the privatization of water itself can help save water. As London, which has privatized water supply, and Bengaluru, where water supply is not privatized, and both these countries are currently running out of water rapidly. Now, I believe privatization is an open option for governments if the circumstances are dire, but this would be only effective as long as the government has appropriate regulatory measures applied.
Thank you, Josh. So, as he said, I think that's a perfect line with which we can end. They say that we are not against water privatization, but there should be rules and regulations which will ensure that water is not just wasted. Water is just drying off. Just imagine years back, maybe about 3 to 4 decades back, there wasn't even a talk about water being scarce in places like India or in Kerala to be specific. But right now, here we are, and one of the reasons we're still getting the same rainfall. So where is this water going? And that maybe has to do more with us moving away from agriculture. The roots which used to keep all the water to the ground level is this is just runoff right now. It ends up being in the sea, and we are unable to use it. And we have industries, we have factories coming in who take crores of liters of water per day. Is it being replenished? Is the main question. It's not about taking, it's about also ensuring that we get it back. So, water is life, but today it's being purchased and siphoned off for a profit. By turning ground and surface water into a private commodity, many corporations are profiting as they deplete water sources and the wildlife that depend on it. So privatized water is good if it's under control and if a good service is provided. But more and more, it's not just about water privatization, it's about sustainable development. How are we going to replenish this water? On that note, with a big thank you to all the panelists who have come here today and shared their point of view, I think it's time for me to sign out, but I would leave you with this food for thought. Where do you stand on this conversation? Where do you stand? Do you feel that water needs to be privatized? Or are you of the opinion that maybe the government needs to pull up their socks and do a better work? So till the next time where we bring about another pressing subject, have a great day.